Donald Trump has sent a letter to Canada threatening a new tariff rate of 35% starting August 1st.
Frankly, Donald Trump just treats Canada.
Donald Trump has ignited a political and economic firestorm by announcing a sweeping 35% tariff on all Canadian imports, a move that dwarfs the rates imposed on most other trading partners and signals a major escalation in U.S.-Canada trade tensions. Effective August 1st, every Canadian shipment crossing into the U.S. will be hit with this punishing tariff, and Trump warned that any retaliation from Ottawa would trigger even more severe penalties. The announcement, made via a White House alert on July 10, sent immediate shockwaves through currency and equity markets. Toronto's S&P/TSX Composite dropped 59 points, or 0.22%, by the close, while the Canadian dollar, the loonie, slipped 0.25% as traders scrambled to recalibrate for what could become a prolonged trade war. The implications of Trump's tariff go far beyond market jitters. With $762 billion in annual cross-border commerce suddenly in jeopardy, Canada finds itself in the eye of a protectionist hurricane. Business leaders are sounding the alarm as supply chains tremble and freight brokers begin pulling spot quotes amid growing uncertainty. Veteran investors describe the move as Section 232 on steroids, invoking the infamous metal tariffs from Trump's first term that nearly fractured U.S.-Canada economic ties. Corporate risk officers have moved quickly, hedging currency exposure and snapping up short-term derivatives in preparation for prolonged volatility. On Bay Street, speculation is building that the Bank of Canada could slash interest rates in a surprise move to protect domestic consumption before tariffs ripple down to store shelves and spike inflation. Inside Parliament Hill, the crisis has sparked a wartime posture. Prime Minister Mark Carney wasted no time convening an emergency evening cabinet, directing his ministers to draw up a counter-strike plan that would match Trump's tariffs dollar for dollar, while sparing critical components needed to keep Canadian factories running. Early drafts suggest a retaliation menu targeting symbolic and strategic U.S. exports like Tennessee whiskey, Wisconsin dairy, and Michigan auto parts, all products rooted in politically sensitive swing states that were key to Trump's 2024 victory. Across the country, Canada's premiers are unified in rare bipartisan fury. Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford issued a public warning that Trump's move could devastate the paychecks of everyday Canadians and gut the province's vital auto corridor along Highway 401. Ford confirmed that Prime Minister Carney has agreed to convene an emergency First Ministers meeting on July 22 in Huntsville, Ontario. The session, now seen as a critical national turning point, will aim to finalize retaliatory steps tailored to inflict political pressure south of the border without destabilizing Canadian supply chains. British Columbia's NDP Premier David Eye echoed Ford's urgency, declaring Trump's 35% tariff an attack on Canadian sovereignty. Eye ordered provincial liquor stores to immediately pull U.S. red state products from shelves and called for a grassroots boycott of American vacations, urging Canadians to weaponize their wallets and embrace a Buy Canadian First campaign. Despite ideological divides, premiers from Alberta to Quebec have pledged unified support for a retaliatory strategy. Collectively, these provinces represent over two-thirds of Canada's GDP and employ 60% of its workforce, forming a formidable front in what is rapidly becoming a continent-defining trade conflict. This fragile economic moment comes with haunting echoes from the past. Just weeks earlier, on June 30, Prime Minister Carney scrapped Canada's digital services tax, expected to bring in nearly $6 billion Canadian dollars over 5 years, in a goodwill gesture meant to smooth negotiations with Washington. That concession now appears naive. On July 10, Trump shattered the diplomatic olive branch with his shock 35% tariff order, offering a cold lesson in what one Canadian official bitterly described as appeasement without a receipt. Behind the scenes, Carney's advisors are drawing from the 2018 playbook, which saw Canada's targeted retaliatory tariffs eventually pressure the Trump White House into reversing steep metal duties. The current plan aims for proportional, precisely aimed economic pressure hitting U.S. exports where they hurt politically, but without strangling Canada's own industrial base. Still, business lobbies are warning that even a carefully measured tit-for-tat could spike inflation by a full percentage point by Thanksgiving and drag third-quarter GDP growth into the red. As August 1 looms, the markets are watching with mounting anxiety. The ripple effects are already real. From stalled freight bookings and currency slippage to murmurs of delayed IPOs and frozen capital raising, the political stakes are equally dire. If no diplomatic breakthrough is achieved by the time Trump's tariffs kick in, the very arteries of North American trade could seize up, unleashing a geopolitical crisis that extends far beyond Wall Street or Bay Street. Now, every cup of coffee, every car part, every export contract, and every voter pocketbook teeters on the brink of an economic showdown that could redefine the US-Canada relationship for a generation. The countdown to August 1st has begun, and the question facing both nations is brutally simple: who blinks first? The New Democrats wasted no time drawing a hard line. At a searing press conference on Parliament Hill on March 5, veteran MP Charlie Angus delivered a defiant message that echoed far beyond Ottawa: Canada will never bend. We will never kiss the gangster's ring. His words struck a chord not just for their fiery tone, but because the economic math backs him up. Industry analysts warn that Trump's newly proposed 50% tariff on imported copper, an essential component in battery packs, electric wiring, and renewable tech, could have cascading consequences across the North American auto industry. That one tariff alone is projected to drive the copper share of vehicle manufacturing costs from 5% to a staggering 9%. For Canadian-built electric vehicles rolling off Ontario production lines, the border-crossing surcharge could embed as much as $3,500 in extra costs per car. Fully imported models could face a punishing $5,700 hit. And for American consumers already choking on an average vehicle transaction price of $46,000, that added charge could shatter hopes of an affordable EV transition. It would also hand a strategic pricing advantage to Chinese and East Asian suppliers, undermining Washington's clean tech reindustrialization goals at the worst possible time. From the mining pits to the factory floor, Canadians see this move as a self-inflicted wound on both nations. Canada refined 192,000 tons of copper last year, enough to power approximately 3 million electric vehicles. If that supply is redirected to Europe or Asia, US-based gigafactories scrambling to secure cathode foil could find themselves without a lifeline, just as Washington attempts to scale up its domestic EV and battery infrastructure. In essence, Trump's tariff doesn't just hurt Canada, it undercuts America's own electrification strategy while simultaneously eliminating a $1 billion Canadian tax concession negotiated in good faith. That's why Charlie Angus and a growing cross-party coalition are calling for a decisive and proportional response. The days of offering diplomatic olive branches, only to watch them tossed into the shredder, are over. The countdown to Trump's August 1st deadline is ticking louder by the day, and with each delay, what once looked like a painful misstep begins to resemble a pattern of political self-sabotage. But this trade war isn't just playing out in boardrooms and political chambers, it's reaching straight into the wallets of everyday citizens. Across the country, Canadians are pushing back with their spending habits. Data from Flight Centre Canada reveals that leisure bookings to the United States dropped by a staggering 40% in February 2025 compared to the same month last year. Families, in protest of what they're calling Trump's tariff tantrum, have torn up their spring break itineraries. What used to be a rush to book vacations from Vancouver to Florida is now a quiet exodus from American shores. Tourism economists warn that if this consumer strike persists through the travel season, U.S. destinations stand to lose over $4 billion in Canadian visitor spending. Money that typically fuels hotels from Buffalo to Disneyland. Tourism economists warn that if this consumer strike persists through the travel season, U.S. destinations stand to lose over $4 billion in Canadian visitor spending, money that typically fuels hotels from Buffalo to Disneyland. And ironically, the very tariffs that ignited this backlash are poised to hit back at the U.S. economy just as hard. According to analysts interviewed by ABC News, the new wave of levies will raise the average American household's cost of living by an estimated $2,400 in 2025. The Yale Budget Lab confirmed that the first items affected will be basic consumer staples, coffee machines, sneakers, and household appliances. In simple terms, American families skipping the Grand Canyon in protest could end up saving twice, once on the airfare, and again when facing lighter price tags at the grocery store and mall. Retailers are already feeling the tremors. Footwear distributors have delayed autumn orders, unsure whether to absorb the duties or pass them on to customers. Appliance manufacturers say the 50% tariff on Brazilian copper, which powers countless components, will begin inflating the cost of washing machines, fridges, and dryers by Thanksgiving right in the middle of the holiday sales season. The result? Inflation that won't fade even after the trade talks end. A Starbucks latte could cost more due to copper surcharged espresso machines. Nike sneakers may carry hidden fees tied to Bangladeshi materials rerouted through tariff-heavy supply chains. That Whirlpool dryer? Expected to ring in $50 higher than last year. These are no longer abstract projections, they are daily reminders that tariffs don't just punish exporters. They creep silently through the economy, inflating prices and distorting supply chains long after the headlines fade. With Canadian consumers retreating and American families bracing for impact, the trade war has jumped the fence from economic theory into personal reality. It's rewriting family budgets, reshaping spending habits, and threatening to redraw the consumer landscape across North America. And this is only the overture. Beneath the surface, what started as a tariff skirmish is building into a full-scale economic hurricane, one that no press conference or political tweet will be able to contain. According to official USR figures, two-way merchandise trade between the United States and Canada reached a staggering $762.1 billion in 2024, making it the single most vital artery in North American commerce. But that economic lifeline is now hanging by a thread. Toronto-based TD Economics warns that if Washington's abrupt 35% tariff remains in place beyond New Year's, and Ottawa mirrors the move with equivalent retaliation, Canada's exports to the US could shrink by 5% by early 2027. That single contraction, while seemingly modest on paper, would carve a devastating 2.4 percentage points off Canada's GDP. An economic body blow with widespread ripple effects. The consequences wouldn't just be ink on a spreadsheet, they'd be written on pink slips and vacant factory floors. Quebec Premier François Legault put a human face on the looming collapse during a February 2 news conference, warning that as many as 100,000 jobs are on the line across the province. From miners in Abitibi to aluminum smelter crews in Saguenay and auto parts suppliers clustered along the St. Lawrence corridor, entire regional economies could vanish into economic oblivion if the bomb tariff isn't diffused in time. But this isn't just Canada's crisis, it's North America's. US automakers, especially in Michigan and Ohio, still depend heavily on Canadian components. 1 in every 8 drivetrain parts assembled in Detroit is sourced from either Quebec or Ontario. If that link breaks, the just-in-time supply chains at Ford's Rouge plant and GM's Orion EV facility could come to a screeching halt within 2 weeks. The result? Mass furloughs, stalled assembly lines, and a sudden detour into industrial chaos during what was supposed to be an electric vehicle boom. Bloomberg Intelligence has added fresh fuel to the warning sirens. Its economists estimate that even a 2% contraction in Canada, precisely what a prolonged tariff war could trigger, would siphon up to 0.3 percentage points off US GDP. The fallout would spread like a virus across supply chains, triggering diminished energy demand, deferred capital projects, and a chill on corporate investment. Wall Street is already showing symptoms of anxiety. Yields on 10-year US Treasury notes dropped 6 basis points the same morning Legault issued his warning. Meanwhile, the S&P 500's machinery subindex suffered its sharpest single-day drop since the March 2023 banking scare. Traders have coined a name for this market stress, the North-South recession trade. The underlying message is stark: a single, aggressive tariff, one overnight executive move, has placed nearly $800 billion in cross-border commerce and over 100,000 Canadian jobs on the chopping block in under 6 months. And if neither labor nor capital can escape the drag of collapsing trade flows, the next casualty might be the fragile economic recovery both countries have spent the past 2 years nursing back to life. The political reaction north of the border has been fast and furious. That 35% tariff announcement welded Canada's often fractured political landscape into a single iron fist of defiance aimed squarely at Washington. Market tickers turned crimson. Vacationers abruptly canceled US trips in protest. Gigafactory executives warned that tariffs could tack on an additional $3,000 to the cost of every electric SUV exported from Canada, further delaying the affordability dreams of the green transition. Economists now warn that what was once a $762 billion artery of commerce is now reduced to a fragile pulse. And Quebec isn't alone in its dread. Other provinces are preparing for cascading layoffs and industrial contractions if the trade spiral holds. In a worst-case scenario, should Trump double down instead of retreating, the global response could rewrite the minerals map. Insiders whisper of early-stage talks between Ottawa, Brussels, and Tokyo about forming a kind of metal OPEC, a global bloc that could reroute the flow of critical minerals and rare earth supplies away from U.S. buyers, driving up costs and lengthening supply chains overnight. On the flip side, if Trump blinks under mounting pressure from Wall Street, Detroit, and swing state governors, there's still a path to de-escalation. A last-minute handshake could give birth to a retooled USMCA 2.0, one both sides would rush to brand as a historic win. But make no mistake, August 1st is no longer just a deadline. It's a detonator. What explodes the day could reshape not just trade policy, but the economic trajectories of two nations for a generation. So now, the world waits. Which headline will flash first across global newswires? Canada strikes back or Trump backs down? The answer could script not just the next chapter of this trade war, but the fate of the entire North American economy. Tell us below, your call might guide our next deep dive.